Hi, my name is Nyasha Mutsekwa. Welcome to the Connected Economy podcast, powered by Moovebeta. Moovebeta is a e-commerce platform that allows you to not only socially move money across 42 African countries, but also allows you to remit from the UK to any African country of your choice. Thank you, Monica, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this entire conversation.
Great. Maybe just to start off, just a little intro about yourself and where you are, and give the audience an understanding of, how did you become the first person to be on this podcast?
Okay, I'm not sure about that, but maybe start by saying, in my professional hat, I'm Professor Monica Kerrets-Makau. I work with Thunderbird School of Global Management, and I'm the academic director for Africa. And I have a passion for all things tech. Maybe that's where and why I'm here. But the other thing is that I've been involved a lot and seen Kenya through the process of being or the process of tech and its starting. I was part of the the lobby group that really started the movement around privatizing and pushing for the privatization of Telecom Kenya very many years ago, and doing all the lobbying with very many friends who are now doing amazing stuff in this country. I later came back to Kenya in 2009 and joined the regulator CAK, the Communications Commission of Kenya, to help push for regulation in this country. So served on the board for 4 years, really to think through what does tech mean and how do we re-regulate. And it was interesting being part of the process of thinking about financing and tech, because for the first time we were beginning to deal with regulation in the sense of, hold on a minute, it's one thing to have tech, but how do you connect tech and payments and mobile? And how do you connect all these different things? And in the country that we are in, everything has always been very silo. So that has been something that we really wanted to do. And as well, connecting platforms, mobile money platforms. I was in the board when the board that was really part of the innovation of ensuring the prices go down so that, Airtel and Safaricom at the time and all the companies can connect in terms of payments, because before we all had 3 phones or 5 phones. You remember that? And then of course been involved a lot with UN UNCTAD. This particular month, actually, by the way, Nyash, we are going to be launching the readiness assessment. I've been privileged to lead the entire project for this country. We'll be launching it on the 21st of this month. And really the assessment has begun to look at what does it mean to be e-ready. And e-ready is about connectedness. We're asking, how are we e-ready across all the different segments in this country, and how do we become connected? So I'm going to stop there, Nyash, and then we can have a conversation around connectedness.
No, I think that's actually a very good place to stop, because one of the things that we've been trying to define for ourselves as we were thinking about this podcast is, what does being in a connected economy mean? There's obviously the trade that people will talk to. There's the social capability. You talk about mobile money and M-Pesa and how that has helped connect people further. But in your view, what is that kind of definition of a connected economy?
All right, Nash, I'm going to start from a really high level. I remember a trip. I was sitting on the board of the World Bank Digital Dividends, and a team that went around the world looking at how connected governments are and what they're doing for their economies. And I found myself in Estonia, the only black lady at the time. And sitting there in Estonia, everything was connected. They even had an e-passport. And I remember then thinking, my goodness, the entire country, everything I could do, I don't know how to explain it. Connectedness of things, how we talk about IoT.
Yes.
And so then it became clear to me that this is where we were going. Until then, I hadn't really seen with my own eyes what it really meant. And as an academic, I've talked about this and I've lived all over the world in different places, but it was very different to experience it. So transpose myself back to the continent and to Kenya. Connectedness means that for us as Africans, I can speak with you from really far away. I can send you stuff from really far away. I can pay you from really far away. I can deal with the issue of transportation without thinking about it because we are connected somehow.
Yes.
I can think about the issue of payment because it's connected somehow. I can think about trade because we are connected. I don't have to see you physically, Nyash.
Yes.
You can sell me something.
Yes.
And we can do it online, or we can do it through the phone, or we can do it. So connectedness for me is the ability for people, things, movement to all sort of function at the same time in one place.
That's it. And I think that's part of, what we've been talking about in just saying, when you've got people who already do some level of trade or already are finding ways to, send each other money, send each other goods, and then they're taking the next step and saying, okay, how do I automate this? How do I digitize this, right? And people talk about, the trade between Kenya and Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania, and we talk about the smallholder traders at the border. But that connectedness doesn't show up in any of the stats.
No, it doesn't. And for Africa, connectedness doesn't show up because for the West, connectedness is really financial. We really discuss, I'm always, for my whole life, I use the word development in italics because we must really question what is development. And in the same context, for us in Africa, our connectedness is also social. It's not just, finance. It's not just about the money. It's the whole social connectedness.
Yes.
And we are very, human beings are really social. But what connectedness with tech means is that I could speak to you, have a conversation, you sell me a good, I make the payments online or on my phone, and I have the good today. And yet I spoke with you, I still spoke with you, so there's a socialness there.
Yeah.
I made the payments through a platform. I didn't have to go to a bank, and we do know that part of the challenges of connectedness in the continent has been our entire financial system and how it has always appealed to a certain class in this society.
Yes.
How it has always been bureaucratic to be able to access financing. So we know that part of the challenge with connectedness for us in the continent has been a financial issue. It hasn't been that we can't talk to each other. It has been that for me to make a payment to you, Nyash, I have to go to the bank. You have to have an account. I have to show evidence for having some sort of money.
Yes.
And we know that, for many Africans in the continent, that evidence does not come in a bureau, in easy, good paper that we can all understand.
Yeah.
And I think this is the amazingness about what connectedness is doing to us. It's allowing a different form of financial inclusion to exist in a continent where financial exclusion was always part of the model.
And let's talk about that financial inclusion, because I think that people talk about financial inclusion and they run to somebody must have a bank account, right?
Yeah.
And, we don't necessarily need bank accounts. We've got our mobile money platforms, but no one is driving the conversation around, what do these mobile money platforms actually give us?
Nyash, when you talk about that, I remember an incident yesterday. So my daughter is a football player and wanted a T-shirt, a Chelsea T-shirt. For those of you listening online, no, I'm not a Chelsea supporter, but my daughter is. And she wanted a Chelsea T-shirt, the blue one. And she went, for some reason, among her friends, they've discussed, and she went online and found a shop called jazzy.co.ke, a Jazzy shop. And it's here in Nairobi. And so what did she said, go online, look at that company. They do T-shirts, and you can have my name written on the back of the T-shirt. Can you make an order and have it sent to me? And I thought to myself, my goodness, 13-year-old is already connected better than me. Is already thought through the process of how to get that T-shirt to her in school. And so I picked the phone. I thought, let's test this to see if this really works. So I called the people up and I said, can I get a T-shirt, labeled number 8 and with her name on it at the back? And they said 30 minutes. Wow. I said, what? I said, then he said, we can deliver it in 30 minutes. And I said, I don't live in the city of Nairobi. I live out in Machakos County and literally past the town of Machakos, so not on Mombasa Road. And so they said, don't worry, we'll get it to Wells Fargo will get it to you. And I thought, that is connectedness.
Yeah.
And in 30 minutes, he was at the Wells Fargo shop. And Wells Fargo told me, I'll have my goods delivered to me at 9 a.m. this morning. And as clockwork, 8:57, I even remember the time because I just recorded it as a mental note in my head. I got a message on my phone that said my T-shirt was delivered at Machakos Wells Fargo. And I then instructed the Wells Fargo to deliver the T-shirt to school, to my daughter's school. That's connectedness. I made the payment on M-Pesa, on one of the mobile platforms in this country, and made that payment. Hardly cost me too much. I mean, I still have issues with the tax that they have, but I made the payment and I had it sent. I didn't physically have to drive to Nairobi. I didn't physically have to be in a shop. I had a conversation with somebody, and that person was quick, with speed to make this connection happen.
So what I'm hearing, right, is, so we've talked about two things. We've talked about connected, firstly, from a social perspective. It's got that social capability, or, for us, we kind of talk about that offline bit where, you need to see somebody, have a conversation with him, and then take it back into the digital world, right? There's that component. Then there's the logistics or the infrastructure that goes with it. And I don't know, because we're here in the Adenian Labs. Does that, is that something that you find startups are thinking about as, how do I, what levels of online, offline, and what infrastructure I have will enable me to succeed?
I think first and foremost today, for any company starting up in the, let's call it e-commerce or connectedness of ideology, I think a company has to really first say, I'm going to do this component, and someone else has to get me to reach the client, depending whether it's a B2B or a B2C. But I think our challenges are that many companies want to try and do everything. But connectedness doesn't allow you to. Connectedness allows many people to play in it, or should allow many players to play in that transaction of connectedness. So whilst I want to be able to sell something, I need to think about how does it get to X, living in Marsabit, for example, which is how many kilometers away from the city of Nairobi. How do I get it to them? And I can't be physically there present. We're beginning to see models where, we think about, if it's payments, we think about agent models, which is where the bank wasn't. And that's part of the challenge with the banking sector. So the banking sector was in certain places, but could not create an agent model that was mobile enough, transit and flexible enough to be where the client is. And I think part of the challenge that we have for startups then is to ensure that they're thinking through the value chain as flexible enough to reach the client anywhere, anytime. Because connectedness is about anywhere, anytime. It's no longer about a certain time, a certain place, it's anywhere, anytime.
And I think when we talk through that, and you start looking at, the economy, and I just want to reference the Google IFC 2020 report that basically is saying, $180 billion is waiting for us in this connected economy.
Can you imagine? And is that for Africa?
That's for Africa.
And
right?
did you know that the investments in the continent in 2022 are expected to reach something like 43 point something billion?
That is for me, sitting in this, having tried the startup world, 9 years ago, and it was very hard to raise money. And now looking at where we are now, that tells you that this connectedness is actually becoming a big thing. And I think you talked about something which I want us to dwell on for a little bit, which is, understanding the value chain. Because if we're talking about a connected economy, then we're talking about, I understand my value chain and I go deep rather than going wide.
And I think the value chain starts with many things. The value chain starts with your infrastructure, because connectedness has to do with infrastructure. For as a business, you need to ask yourself, what infrastructure capabilities do you have to allow for connectedness, and where does that infrastructure reach or stop, and who takes it continuing? What in tech we call the last mile. So where is the infrastructure and where is the last mile in relation to the infrastructure, and who's owning those components of that infrastructure? For the user and the consumer in any country, many of us don't see the back end last mile process. We don't see how connectedness is happening in infrastructure. We might be seeing the fact that I am subscribed to a mobile phone by X, but it's not necessarily that mobile company X is actually the one dealing with the last mile. It's not the one dealing with the infrastructure process. And we know that. Nyash, you know this. You've been in that, connectedness. So for a company, and today we need to think, how is my infrastructure going to get me to the last mile? And who's going to help me get there? And then we've also got to think about the fact that we've got skill set issues. And yes, it doesn't look like a value chain, but it is part of your value chain, because how educated are the people who are going to be using your products? And we must ask that question, because unlike the West, where almost everybody understands this, this is new in this continent. So for me, something that would never have been in the value chain is now part of the value chain. It's something that we wouldn't think about the extent to which people are savvy on tech, are savvy on trade. We wouldn't think about it necessarily as a business. But now you have to. Because before, physically, someone came to your shop.
And you could talk to them.
And you could talk to them. But now I am asking for connectedness that is beyond the physical. And if it's beyond the physical, then there's another thing that's playing up. It's the fact that does this person know how to transact beyond the physical? Do they understand the principles behind transaction in a non-physical world?
And I think that's where, we start seeing some of those challenges, because some of the things that you're talking to there really reference to, let me call it the political economy, right? What are governments doing to enable us to actually create that connectedness? What are the DFIs doing to help with that? Because the success of any of the startups that we have seen on this continent, especially in the lab, is this kind of full-blown focus, focusing on one thing and trying to solve that problem.
All right, so Nyash, I haven't even finished. That was the second thing on the value chain. So the third one on the value chain is, of course, the payments model. Because now you're not transacting in cash. And if you are, it might be half and half. So, maybe there's a component, but you're no longer, it's now a payless, cashless. But what does that mean? And so in your value, you've also got to think as a business, what models? I mean, this conversation we're having is being powered by Move. And it's part of that process, really thinking through, how do we move cash? How do we move cash across a transient physical cars? We used to have cars that used to move money to the bank. And now we're thinking about payment platforms. What sort of payment platforms do we have? And how do we connect these payment platforms? It should be possible. Yesterday, I had a team in Dubai that was having drinks. I have students, a set of students in Dubai working on a company project. And I wanted to buy them their first drink. I'm in Kenya, yes, but I should be able to buy, my team of students their first drink yesterday evening. And my brain racked for how am I going to, it should have been simple. I should have been able to send money to where they were from my mobile phone. And I'm like, drinks on the house to my, my students for their first drinks. And I had to call somebody, tell them to please use their money, and of course dirhams, pay that, let me know how much it is, and then we can figure out the transaction model for me to be able to send him that money. Because there wasn't a system in my head immediately, or I didn't have an app on my phone immediately that could completely break that process. And so payments is another value chain that we've got to think about that we never used to think about. And as a business, we've got to think through the payments model. What is it going? Is it understood by people? Do we understand payment model as a company? And every startup today and every company today, as we move into the connected world, has to enter into the payments thought process. It never used to be something you
because
deliberately
all you just needed was, a till.
Yes.
Now you don't. Now you till. You
Now
don't.
you don't. And we're not card. We don't necessarily use card. You don't necessarily, use. I mean, that's part of why we in the continent of Africa have had to rethink through how we think about payments, because we're not the West where a card is something that comes to you. I remember years ago living in Australia, and every week there was an email, a letter on my, on the post box at the door with, we want to give you a credit card.
Yeah,
I mean, it's given to you, it's thrown at you. And we're not in that part of the world that does that. And so, really rethinking through payments. And if I look at, do you want me to go on with the rest, or do you want to stop and we discuss that?
I want us to, because we've been talking for a bit, and actually I think we need to have a second session. We need to have a part 2. And I want us to just kind of hone in on, kind of like the 3 things that we would say, in the future, 2050, we say these 3 things have been achieved, and therefore, there's the Africa Free Trade Agreement. These are like global, continental-wide stuff. There's the PAP system. But what are the 3 things that you think would be like in the future? If these 3 things are achieved, we've connected.
Yeah, I think, just a great question, Yash. And I think we need to start with our cost model for tax. In country and out of country. I think there's a lot of double taxations when it comes to payments and moving money across within in-country, out of country, and global. So when I think about in-country, then I think about East Africa, I think about the continent of Africa, and I think about globally, I think consumers are being taxed a lot through that process of moving a simple cash transaction. And so our mobile, I think I'm hoping that we get to a place, and 3 things that need to be achieved. The first one is that we evaluate our cost models for taxing and how we tax and how we think of the whole taxation model when it comes to tech. And because we haven't yet sat down to really re-examine this whole process of tax payments and technology, we still find, and I was doing a study the other day and looking at the taxation models across countries between things, all Internet of Things and tech, and you're finding a lot of double governments, because of their lack of awareness on what this looks like, are still in the silo mindset. And so we need to move to a point where governments begin to say, things are no longer the same. Even government systems have to be connected.
Yes.
And that connectedness is not just in technology, but in their thought process of policy.
Yes, yes.
So then that way, we're not thinking about finance, technology, and creating separate tax models across silo ministries, across silo things. But we're really thinking about tax models that work. I think it's still punitive in the continent. If you look at payment options and moving of money, it's still quite expensive for the day-to-day person.
Yes.
And I think, and I'm looking forward to 2050, where it really is an easier process. So that's my first one. I think my second one is really the fact that we have many people. I mean, in Kenya, there are more phones in the country than there are people. I think the last statistics for last year was 57 million Kenyans. 57 million phones exist in the country. That's more phones than the total population. But then what does more phones mean? More phones mean that I'm hoping that, 2050, that we have an educated workforce where there are very many ready apps on my phone that don't cost much, that allow me to play with connectedness.
Yes.
And apps is the model in which you will, whether it's a USSD code or non-USSD code, and whether it's an advanced format of, the app and a non-advanced format, we can play with different, and this, we can play with different models depending on the type of phone one has. We are moving to a continent where smartphones are becoming the norm.
Yeah.
And if smartphones are becoming the norm, then there is need to think through what sort of apps exist for me to be able to connect with people. We have right now the global apps, we have the Facebook, the Instagrams, and those are all Facebook. We have WhatsApp and everything, but we need to think through localized apps as well. And localized apps that are in country and out country. I'd like to see the continent talk more to itself. We haven't seen that, and connectedness should mean for us as a continent that I can talk to somebody in Zimbabwe very quickly and easily and transact with them. I can talk to someone in Malawi and I can move to Morocco, come down to Chad, move southwest to Tunisia, come down through. I mean, it should be a fun process and an exciting process for us to connect within our continent. I would like to ask, and even as we talk about the Africa free trade, that process is being driven by the West. And I would like to ask the governments in the continent and policymakers in this continent to begin to speak to each other more. We need connectedness. It is here with us. Then let's connect each other in the continent. Ethiopia is 1 billion people sitting right next to us in Kenya. Come on, 1 billion next to us. We should be able to connect with it, trade and everything. We move up. You move upwards to Nigeria, Ghana, and everywhere else. Technology also breaks for the continent, and that's part of the reason why I'm hoping that we can see it breaks the language barrier. Because one of the biggest things in this continent has been the language barrier. But with technology, that language barrier is broken more. And I think the third thing, hopefully then, is that we have more people, more startups in this country that are allowed to, and in the continent, that are allowed to flourish. We need to provide investment to them. We need to allow them to grow. And I'm really glad to be part of this project empowered by Move. I want to wish Move well and the team and all the interconnected startup companies around, because my joy is to see startups really grow. And the youth in this continent are the people that are going to take us there.
Yeah, and I think, and I think, just talking to that last point, the interconnectedness of the startups is basically our, as we say in the tech world, our moat. It's basically going to be our differentiator, and I think it's going to be the driver to get us to a 2050 where we're totally connected. And I like that. I mean, I've always read about, the almonds in Morocco, but we can't access them, right?
No. Yeah.
So thank you very much. I think you've given us a really good start to understanding, right, the connected economy, what it means, how it is playing both governmental and in the startup world. What I think we need to come back and talk to, and after you've launched the UNTAD report, is just that e-readiness, and actually start gleaming ideas from there to say, what does that e-readiness tell us about where we are today? And I'm sure the guys watching would be very interested to hear that and to hear and to get that data, because that's how you start a business.
Okay.
From there. So thank you very much, Professor Monica. Thank you very much, Moovebeta. Again, Moovebeta, connected platform, driving the connected economy, connected to 42 African countries. You can send through mobile money, micropayments, remittance, whatever it is, social banking. You can do all of that on the Moovebeta platform. So thank you very much, guys, and hope to see you in the next show.